the Chase Thomas Podcast, for people who have nothing but time to kill.
All right, we're back here on the Chase Thomas Podcast, where old friend, always an NFL super friend of mine, JP Acosta of SB Nation is here. JP, good afternoon, sir. How are you?
I'm doing great. We got half the NFL super friends back. The vibes are high. We're ready to talk some draft prospects.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see if the vibes stay high, because as longtime listeners of the Chase Thomas Podcast know, JP Acosta and I are forever at war with how he sees the Tennessee Mickey Mouse offense, that he calls it here, JP. Have you evolved a little bit? Can I tell you that there's some new wrinkles, that there might be some new splits, some new variations for Tennessee's offense this year?
As long as they still run the super wide gimmicky splits, I don't know if there's any evolving going on, but I will say I appreciate how they design their run game, and I appreciate their defense.
That's a lot, though. I mean, that's a big part of it. So that's a lot of appreciating. So it's that's a step in the right direction, JP Acosta.
Positive growth. It takes some time to reflect on a Tennessee team that sucked offensively, which was great for the brand.
Well, they sucked down the field, like explosive plays. They ran the ball extremely well, like they have all 4 years. Don't throw a lot of picks. That's part of the staple. I mean, it's just the chunk plays were gone, and the chunk plays have really just been gone the last 2 years, and that's why this is just such a big year, because the defense has gotten better each and every year under Tim Banks, and the scoring defense continues to improve. And I mean, I think they're going to be right there in the top 10 in defensive scoring again this year, and it keeps them in games. Like, it's just Tennessee's got a high. It's wild to be going into year 5 where you're like, yeah, I mean, the defense just makes it provides such a high floor for what Heupel and his teams are, because they're just really good, and there's just really great coaching with Rodney Garner, William Inge, and then Tim Banks. Obviously, I mean, it's a lot of talent on that side of the ball.
Yeah, it's a lot of credit to Tim Banks and the recruiting, because I think they've recruited really well, especially on all sides of the defensive line. Of course, defensive front. We're going to talk about some of their defensive guys up front, but they had a couple corners that really stood out when I went back and watched their defense. When I was watching guys like James Pearce, Omar, Norman, Lott, and I'm like, okay, like I can see them continuing this trend of really high level defensive play, and it's because of how well they've recruited, how well they've developed. So a lot of credit goes to Tim Banks, a lot of credit goes to position coaches, because I think they really got something going there.
I think so too. I mean, Jermod McCoy was awesome last year at the corner spot, he's coming off a torn ACL though this year. He tore his ACL in December, so we're hoping he's going to be ready come opening first. I mean, you got Syracuse in the Dome now, the Benz here in week 1, and Georgia comes to town week 3. So you got to have him ready. Him and Ricky Gibson, the third, are both really, really good lockdown corners. And Boot Carter is a guy I think JP is going to love over the years. That Boot Carter is just like, and he's going to play some offense this year. It's too early. I don't think it's going to be a Travis Hunter situation, but Boot Carter he's got a great superstar football name. Boot Carter is just an all-timer, but also I think he's going to continue to be a star, and I think he's going to be kind of the leader of this defense going forward. But Boot Carter is the next probably star in the secondary. I think you're going to have fun watching Boot Carter next year, JP Acosta. But we are going to talk about some Tennessee draft prospects this year and where they'll hear their name called, because I think you probably know where I'm going to start here, JP, because it's something that I think a lot of Tennessee fans have struggled to wrap their head around, in terms of how does a guy who before this past year, look at, like, people were mocking James Pearce number 1 overall. Like, there was a Mario Williams type buzz to him. And at the worst, you were like, yeah, he's probably a top 10 pick, and barring something crazy happening, it felt like he was going to be a high-end first rounder before last year. And he had a solid year. He didn't have as good of a year as he did in 23. Part of that, I think, is just not having Tyler Barron on the opposite side for the Rabbits package, and their pass rush opportunities. Like, the other side didn't really help a whole lot. They also didn't blitz a lot this year under Tim Banks. They blitzed a lot more 2 years ago, and they just sent 4, and they weren't able to get home in some big games, like against Ohio State and Georgia. And like Carson Beck dropping back 40 times, and he doesn't get knocked on the ground once against Tennessee's pass rush. So that was a weird part of the year, but I don't really understand in terms of like, because I just want to keep this straight. Like, I don't like all the work ethic or all that other kind of like it. This is source season, which I just don't like, especially with these guys.
Silly.
Yeah, and I just look at it where I'm like, okay, I don't. I'm curious as a ball knower, JP. When you're going through Tennessee tape last year and really just all the James Pearce tape, how would you explain the drop and what teams are thinking in terms of that and what you're seeing with James Pearce year to year?
So keeping it strictly on the field, I think what I was looking for with James Pearce, and full disclosure, I had James Pearce as my number one overall player going into the 2024 season. I thought he was going to be incredible. I was thinking like Brian Burns caliber of player and something that I think he still can be if he reaches his potential. But what I was hoping for was a little bit more oomph in the run game. And it's tough because he's such a slim 245 pounds. It's going to be hard for him to play in the run game, especially at that size. You know, he's just a really tall, lean guy. His arms aren't that long or not as long as you'd expect. But I was hoping for a little bit more oomph, a little bit more aggressiveness in the run game. And then I think when it comes to the pass rush, I was hoping for a little bit more of a development with his counters. You know, sometimes this is more of a credit to how good Tennessee's defensive front is. He played limited snaps. You know, he was rotating in and out of the games. He had that ankle injury that I think slowed him down really early in the season. So I think it's a large part of all of that. But I think for James Pearce, in terms of how I evaluate him or how I evaluate him now, is he is such an explosive pass rusher off the ball. But when you take his combine performance, having a 31-inch vertical jump, which that's the trait that kind of translates more for explosiveness. And I was hoping that he'd be a little bit more explosive for a guy that banks his game on explosiveness and burst. The 10-yard split was great. Vertical jump, broad jump, not great at all. So it leaves me wondering, like, why? Like, what happened here? But what I think James Pearce is a weak side 3-4 outside linebacker who is going to fly off the ball. I think his timing is really good. I think the burst and the bend is there. And I think he flashed the ability to do some counters. But I just wonder if he's consistent enough in the run game and consistent enough with those counters to truly be considered a first-round talent. I think his range is truly more towards the back end of the first round and early into the second round. But I think for him, what'll do him a lot of good is if he goes to a team that has an already established run defending edge, someone who will eat up space, a glass eater. You know, we always say like the guys up front who are just going to hold on blocks, and that'll allow him in his first year. He doesn't have to play all three downs and stop the run. You can rotate him in as a designated pass rusher. I'm not super big on comparisons player to player wise, but he reminds me a lot of Will McDonald coming out of Iowa State. But the issue there is Will McDonald was also explosive in the jumps. James Pearce was faster, you know? So he's truly a little bit of a confusing prospect because you see 2023 and you're like, oh yeah, that's a lock first round pick. But now it's sort of, I can see the vision here as a designated pass rusher right away. Maybe we can get him to be at his best in a few years, but how much time are you willing to put into that?
That's fair. I mean, it's funny. The McDonald part of it is like, that was a huge stunner when the Jets took him as early as they did. I don't know. Where did you have him mocked at that point?
I think I got to go back into my big board for that year. I think that was 2023. But I had no idea that he was going to get drafted in the top 15. I thought he would probably go around later. You know, I thought he would be a little bit more of a like end of the first round guy, but I was not expecting, you know, I had him as a 35th ranked player in that draft class. So him
that's
going
kind of where
15,
you have Pearce right now is like somewhere in that range.
Pearce, I have 23rd right now.
Okay.
I might move up or down. That's as of my latest big board, which was done after the combine. I'm going to release my final one a couple weeks before the draft. So we'll maybe see some movement there. But I think they're very similar players in how they win in terms of, they have that speed and burst. But where Will McDonald is better is as a counter rusher. He knows what he knows his inside spin move is his counter. I think James Pearce is still learning that counter. I think he has shown the ability to have a nice long arm bull rush, but how often are you going to be popping that off when you're a slender 245 pounds and you have shorter arms? So I wonder if he can get into the right ecosystem where he doesn't have to play right away. Maybe you can turn him into something there.
That's interesting because, like, Tennessee, one of the things, I mean, it's already torturous enough for being a daily Falcons fan here, JP Acosta. But I've seen Pearce mocked a couple times over the last month to Atlanta, and Mykel Williams has been thrown around there, Jalen Walker, Jahad Campbell. Clearly, like, obviously, the Falcons will always need a pass rusher because that's just something that the Falcons just cannot, for whatever reason, ever find a long-term answer. I kind of like with Jeff Ulbrich and what he's kind of doing, because he was McDonald's coach, and that's the team they took him in the first round. And I'm kind of thinking about it. I'm like, as you're talking about it, you're talking me more into Pearce and Atlanta being a interesting fit. The worry I have, though, and it speaks to what you're saying about patience with him in terms of like because I think everyone just looks at sacks and they look at the numbers and they look at and I think Pearce walking into a situation where you're a year removed from Matthew Judon being an absolute disaster here, and the Vic Beasley stuff, the Takk McKinley stuff, there's just it's not fair to Pearce that he would be walking into that, but there would just be an immediate like, hey man, like you're a sack guy. And these are guys who most Falcons fans watch a lot of SEC football, have watched a lot of James Pearce. They know who James Pearce is. The difference is like no Jets fan knew who McDonald was. They're like, oh, that's how to. They weren't grinding the Iowa State tape. Pearce is a no name and a guy who's been on the radar of a lot of people for many years, and you've seen him wreak havoc for Tennessee for the last couple of years. I don't know. I'm kind of, when you think about Ulbrich coming in with Raheem Morris and what they're running, is that a fit? Do you think that would be something the Falcons should do? And I don't know, talk me into it or talk me out of James Pearce going to my favorite team.
So the way I can talk you into it is simple. Atlanta had the least sacks in the NFL last season. If you want production, if you want someone who can bring a different type of pass rusher, Matthew Judon at this stage of his career is more of a power rusher. He's going to be the one that you use on stunts, on loops, and things of that nature. You're not going to have him be the I'm going to win one-on-one guy. I don't think James Pearce will be that instant guy either. But if you look at their room right now,
could he rotate with Leonard Floyd?
He could rotate with Leonard Floyd. Is a really good, like, maybe you can get him to that in the first couple of years and see if you can get him into something more. But having him rotate with Leonard Floyd, you rotate him in with Ebiketie, where you can kind of let those guys be hammers on the rundowns, and then rotate him in as a pass rusher in order to let him grow off the field in terms of his run defense and just get bigger. I don't know how much more weight he can put on his frame because he's so slender. But if you want him to just come in and immediately go, hey, we need you on third down. That is the only down we need you on. We'll rotate you in. I think that's worth maybe a pick on day 2. I think where the Falcons are at 15, I don't know if I would spend a pick on Pearce there because I think with the other pass rushers on the board offer a little bit more completeness to their game. But in terms of a second-round designated pass rusher, I actually think if he comes back healthy, James Pearce and Braylon Trice will actually play well off each other in terms of what they do best. But I do think there's a way you can talk yourself into James Pearce being a fit for the Falcons. Now, if I want to talk you out of it, it's again, do you have the patience to let him only play third downs? And if you have that patience, I'd say go for it on day 2. But if you're picking him at 15, you're expecting him to be a 3-down player. And I just don't think he's that at this stage of his career. So I worry that if they pick him at 15 or pick him expecting him to be a 3-down contributor early, I think that's going to stunt his growth and development because he's just not built for that yet.
I like it. I know I saw a couple months ago, or I guess it's been a couple months, right? With the Senior Bowl, you're down there, and someone that I kind of wondered about with draft guys, I was like, it's just one of those, when you cover Tennessee, like, Omar Norman Lott is a really good player. And, in the interior, like he was a really good pass rusher in the interior, was important for Tennessee on third downs. He wreaked havoc for Tennessee. Like he was a really, really good transfer addition 2 years ago from Arizona State. It seems like he and Pearce might go around where the other one goes. And I think that would have been a big surprise to a lot of Vol fans before the year. But Omar Norman Lott, I think he shot up, and I think you liked what you saw from him in the Senior Bowl. And I'm curious, what do you make of Omar Norman Lott? And do you think he's a second, third round guy at this point based on what you saw?
I freaking love Norman Lott. I think I have my all JP team coming out later this week. Omar Norman Lott is going to be on there.
I knew it. Like I'll watch it. I'm looking through JP's tweets. And I'm like, JP's all in on Omar Norman Lott.
Fantastic pass rusher. If you just want somebody, it's so jarring to see his quickness off the ball, especially, I don't think he's the best run defender right now, but you can see the potential there in terms of just lateral quickness. If you run a 4-3 defense that only asks your interior defensive lineman to go forward through one gap, you can see Omar Norman Lott really living there, but you get Omar Norman Lott as a pass rusher. And I think that lateral quickness, the violence that he plays with, he has heavier hands for a guy that's around 290, 285 pounds. I worry a little bit about the size only because the injuries have kind of his postseason process with, he got injured during the Senior Bowl, didn't do a full workout at the combine. I wonder how his body will hold up continuously. So maybe that makes me think you want to rotate him in early in his career so he can kind of put a little bit more on his body. But if you want somebody who's going to be a pure pass rusher from the interior, he has an 18.9% pass rush win rate over the last 2 seasons. He gets after the passer. And in a draft class that has so many different varieties and different body types of pass rusher, Omar Norman Lott is one of my favorite undersized 3 techs because you can see it immediately. You can see the flashes during games where it's like, oh my God, I was watching James Pearce tape looking for James Pearce, and Norman Lott was always making a play. And I'm like, who is this? Yeah. And then I kept watching. I'm like, oh, this guy is good. Like this is going to be one of my guys. So I'm a huge Omar Norman Lott fan. I think for teams that really just need that undersized 3 technique as a pass rusher, I think you're going to get a gem in that kid. I think that a lot of teams really like him. He sort of reminds me, and again, not a big player-to-player comparison guy. This is only just body type and play style. He's very similar to Osa Odighizuwa from the Dallas Cowboys in terms of just the lateral quickness and burst off the ball. That's where he wins as sort of an undersized defensive tackle. But I love the kid. I think he's going to be awesome.
Where do you think he goes? What round?
So I think he's going to go around day 2. I think he's going to be a day 2, second, third round guy. I think it's largely just because the injuries and combining that with the undersized where he doesn't hold gaps in the run game. He's not very scheme versatile. If you're going to get him, you want him controlling one gap and that's it. He's not
You want him in on passing downs for sure.
Yeah, you want to start him on passing downs early. And if you're going to play him against the run, don't have him try and hold up double teams. I think that's going to be more for teams that have a thumper behind them at linebacker who wants to play off all these blocks and can keep themselves clean at the second level. I think Norman Lott will probably be a better fit for those kinds of teams. But if you're thinking about the Jaguars at 36, if they don't pick Mason Graham at 5, if you're looking for a pass rushing 3 technique, I think Omar Norman Lott makes a lot of sense for them. I think
you want him on your team, JP.
I do want him on my team. I think he's awesome. I think the Texans could use a guy like that in terms of pass rush from the interior. But if you think about what the Rams have done with all their undersized 3 techniques and how they win rushing the passer, that's something that Omar Norman Lott can do at the next level.
And they drafted a Vol 2 years ago because the Raiders may or may not have drafted the wrong Byron Young at the time, which is one of my favorite stories that I really hope is true because that's an all-timer who's been great and was another great find for Garner and company. But yeah, I would love that. It's also kind of wild to hear. It sounds like to you, and we'll get to Dylan here as our final big one, is that it's not out. I think this would blow a lot of Vol fans' minds, but to you, it's not crazy that Omar Norman Lott might go before Pearce in the draft. It's in play.
Given everything that's been said about Pearce off the field combined with sort of an underwhelming. I know he ran a 4.47 40, but everybody knew he was going to run fast. You know, if you watch James Pearce, you know he's going to run fast. Given how their postseason circuit playing in the Senior Bowl, I don't think Norman Lott worked out at the combine, so he kind of takes a little bit of a hit there. I could see it. I could see Norman Lott getting drafted a little higher than Pearce, but I just wonder if teams are going to look at Pearce's 2023 and go, yeah, I can do something with that, and just kind of throw 2024 out the window.
Interesting. Dylan Sampson, JP Acosta. It's interesting because I think Mina Kimes is really in on Dylan Sampson, if I remember correctly, seeing some of her stuff over the last month. Ashton GT is obviously RB1 in this draft, and he's just, he's just insane at Boise. But behind him, I think it's kind of like the same thing in college, right? Where you had Johnson, the Iowa kid, you had Omarion Hampton, is that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Omarion Hampton from UNC, and Dylan Sampson were all like in that tier 2 together. They're kind of squashed, those three, and all super, super productive backs, or different backs, but all super productive. When you watch the Dylan Sampson tape, because this is his first year as a full guy, like Tennessee usually rotates 3 backs, and he rotated with Jalen Wright and Jabari Small 2 years ago. This year it was like, hey, injuries and losing Small and Jalen to the NFL. It was like, all right, Dylan, here, and like a limited passing game, a new redshirt freshman quarterback. It's like, we're going to put a lot on you. And he won games for Tennessee in the second half. I mean, he got better as the game wore on. Great leader, great locker room guy. But natural leader. What do you make of Dylan Sampson at the next level, and where do you see him ultimately winding up?
So it's tough because this running back class is absolutely loaded.
Yeah.
But I think Sampson is going to be one of those guys that gets picked either late on day 2 or early on day 3 that ends up playing a serious role for an NFL team. The thing that stands out immediately is the juice. It's the explosiveness. I mean, former track athlete, not just a former track athlete, a former very good track athlete. Like, he can run. And like, it's not only, like Jalen Wright, but it's not only the explosiveness in terms of speed. It's the explosiveness that he makes his cuts with. It's the explosiveness in the jumps. It's the lateral, the ability to go from It's the ability from going from running north to south to east to west and then go north to south again. Like, it's so impressive. Still one of the guys that I think does that or did that at his best was Tyreek Hill, who I think runs faster sideways than most guys do running forward. But Sampson is such a good back he was such a good back for Tennessee's gap scheme runs because I think his vision sort of is up and down, which makes sense considering first year starter. He's not going to have a lot of that experience in zone runs. But when you get him behind either a pulling guard or Tennessee loves running that little insert play where the tight end off the line of scrimmage kind of inserts right behind the center and Sampson just follows him. I think for a team that runs a lot of gap scheme like that, you run a lot of power counter where you're not asking him to really like see lanes open or make defenders miss with his eyes. I think if you get him in space, if you get him running downhill, I think he could be a really nice addition. I actually think I'm kind of talking myself into him being on the Chargers in terms of just being a good complement to what Najee Harris already is in terms of the explosiveness. I want to see what he does in the passing game. I want to see him kind of develop a little bit more there. But in terms of just a pure runner and pure speed, he's one of the fastest players in the class.
Yeah, it's hard to say because like Tennessee, they don't throw to backs. Like Hypo scheme just does it. So it's not like I just don't know what Dylan is out of the backfield, you know? So I imagine it's hard for NFL teams to kind of know what they're getting. Because I mean, it's just most NFL offenses, they look for that more. And I just don't know what Dylan is out of the backfield in terms of the passing game. I expected more actually out of the passing game for him this past year, but it's just that wrinkle was never really included for Tennessee. They added the 12 personnel that we had not seen in the first 3 years, but that was also just by necessity because the tackles were not good and also banged up, and it was just like the only way we can keep Nico upright and keep this thing humming is we're going to have to make 12 personnel our base, and it's not going to be sexy. It's not going to be Hendon Hooker and company in 22, but we're going to win 10 games and we're getting to the college football playoff playing this way. I'm curious, like, because I'm a big Jalen Wright guy. And I loved watching Jalen Wright progress over the course of his Tennessee career. Because I mean, he was track guy, and he had that natural speed, but he put on weight and with muscle and was able to still have that speed and still be really good getting to the second level. He averaged, I think, 7.5 yards per carry coming out, and he goes what, third? Did he go third or fourth?
I think it was fourth round.
Okay. Do you think? I mean, when you look at the two together, I mean, who do you like more at the NFL level? And does it feel like Sampson has more of a potential of being a workhorse kind of guy that we saw at Tennessee? Like, is that a potential possibility for him? Or is it just by necessity you're not a believer in Sampson being able to hold up as a 3-down back?
So I think for me with Sampson, it is the ability on third down, not only as a pass catcher, but as a pass protector. I like to see him develop a little bit more there, but it's tough, being 5'9", 200 pounds, like you're going to be smaller than a lot of the guys you have to block.
Yeah.
So you got to win with technique. You got to win with leverage. And I think that's something, if you get him into an NFL room with NFL running back coaches, that'll help him with his development. I actually think Sampson might be a little bit better in terms of, if you are looking for a guy that could potentially become a workhorse 3-down running back, I think Sampson might be better than Jalen Wright, because I think Sampson is better between the tackles. And that's something that popped up with Jalen Wright's first year in Miami. He couldn't run between the tackles. Despite putting on all that weight, I don't think he had a very, very good vision between the tackles. I think it was, if you get him outside where he can use that speed to build up, he was a lot better. But I think Sampson has better contact balance. First of all, I think he is a load to try and bring down. Of course, you guys watched Dylan Sampson break billions of tackles at Tennessee, but that's something that's going to immediately play in the NFL. If you're able to make people miss, and if you're able to win on gap scheme runs, which seems like it's where the NFL is going thus far, I think Sampson might have the better potential to become a 3-down back. But I also think Jalen Wright might have more use right now because of the speed and the pass catching.
Final thing, JP. Brew is complicated to me because Brew, before the injury in 23 in the South Carolina game, I think he was turning into a different player. Like, I think he was going to be really, really good in 23 before that devastating ankle injury. Last year was just weird for a lot of reasons. He's another great leader, super huge. I mean, he played defensive end in high school. Like, he's a big-bodied receiver. I still think he's someone, to me, where I was like wondering like what he would be at the next level. What do you think his NFL future looks like? Because he's a very different kind of receiver than what Heupel has put out in the NFL. Because Dante Thornton is kind of like the traditional Heupel type. I think it's less interesting to me, because I think someone's going to take a flyer on Dante. He runs super fast. Dante was Tennessee's best receiver this past year. Like, Dante's going to get drafted.
Yeah.
Brew, I don't know. Like, I don't know how ball knowers look at Brew and how they judge like what they saw early on in his Tennessee tenure to now, to like, he's an elite blocker at his position. Like, he's extremely physical, and that matters. I mean, at the NFL level, of being able to block and not being afraid of contact. And Brew is a mauler. So I just feel like he's a different kind of receiver type that I don't know. So what do you think happens with Brew at the next level? And do you think he does get drafted?
So the difficult thing for Brew is the injury. It's the injury already sapping the speed that I don't want to say like wasn't there already.
Yeah.
But I will say that his game is not built on speed. So you wonder if his speed was also sapped by the injury. He didn't run at the combine, didn't test at the combine. So you don't have those athletic measurements on him. But what Brew is like you said, he is a kick-ass blocker. Like, he is going to block his butt off, and I think that will get you onto an NFL roster. I don't know if it'll get you drafted, but it'll get you onto an NFL roster, because you'll be able to play. If you can block, it's the old saying, no block, no rock. I think that's something that if Brew can do at the next level, he will get playing time. I just worry about the separation and about just the speed. I think that's going to be the biggest thing for him. How is he going to win at the NFL level if he's not going to be able to separate and he's not going to run fast? A lot of guys win on contested catches, but can Brew do that at the next level? Banking on contested catches is really hard, especially for a guy that, again, coming off that injury. It's hard for anybody to bank their draft stock on contested catches only. But I think for Brew, it'll be especially important that he develops some other form of his game. Because like you said, people are going to buy into Dante Thornton because he's 6'4" and ran a 4.3.
Yeah.
Like at worst, you can just put him on the field and his speed is already going to raise a radar for the defense. What is Brew's calling card? What is going to be his thing when he gets onto an NFL field?
Yeah, it's like, can he be Michael Jenkins with the Falcons? Like, just the big, like, I swear, Michael Jenkins never beat anybody. Like, but he was a starter for the Falcons for a while. It's like, no one ever feared Michael Jenkins on the opposite side, but he hung around, man. But I don't know.
I think for Brew McCoy, I think what he should try and become is Tim Patrick, who is the receiver for the Detroit Lions. Excuse me. Phenomenal blocker. That's how he plays. That's how he gets onto the field. He can go and dig out safeties and nickel defenders in the run game, but then is also super reliable over the middle of the field. And so is that going to be something, again, I don't want to say this as a denigration to the Tennessee offense, but there just isn't a lot of routes run over the middle of the field for their receivers. Everything, because it is so wide out, everything is to the hash marks. Everything is outside the hash marks. He doesn't have a lot of the in-between experience, despite being a more experienced guy. And then, he kind of floundered around a little bit, the Senior Bowl, left the Senior Bowl early, but I think his stock is going to ultimately rely on what can he do outside of being a good blocker and what can he develop.
JP Acosta, what can the good folks check out from you over at SBNation.com this week?
Yeah, so I just I'm writing a lot of NFL draft pieces, draft coming soon. So look out for my all JP team, which is just guys I like on every day of the draft, So look out for that. Make sure to follow me, see what I'm doing, see where I'm going.
I have to ask you, I forgot. Like, you did a NFL draft players as Pokemon. Can you do you have some off the top of your head for the Tennessee players we've talked about here?
That is interesting. I think for James Pearce, I'm gonna go. Let me check just to make sure I get the name right. Let's see. So I'm gonna say he is Combuskin, which is the second level that Torchic gets to before becoming Blaziken.
Okay.
So a fire type, the speed, the burst off the edge, you see it, but he has some growth to do before he becomes that fully evolved version.
Okay, I like it.
Then Omar Norman Lott's difficult because smaller defensive end, shorter arms, really fast. I don't want to say Hitman top because the hands. It's all in the hands for him. He's got strong hands. He's got quick hands, and he'll knock you out. It's very easy for him. And then I'm not sure if I can think of one off the top of my head for Dylan Sampson. I think I'm gonna have to go and dig into the vault for that one.
He might be a Bulbasaur.
Yeah. I see it. It. You're gonna have to get him early and then let him become, Ivysaur or Venusaur.
Yeah. JP Acosta, thank you so much for the time. It's great to reconnect and keep doing great work. Enjoy the draft season. Enjoy the break once it finally wraps up, because that will happen sooner rather than later. And we'll be able to move forward with the NFL offseason, and everything else in the college football season will be here before you know it as well. JP, thank you so much, my friend, and we'll have to check back again soon.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Nicely done, nephew. The Chase Thomas Podcast. Hell yeah.